So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about my experience of championing UX in Marvel Contest of Champions. And I realized when David was talking about some of the stuff is quite similar talk, but we'll go a little bit more in details about how we got there. How many of you guys here have heard of Marvel Contest of Champions? It's a mobile game. Okay, a fairly decent number. How many of you guys have installed and played the game? Quite a bit. And how many of you guys have actually, you guys are actually playing the game right now actively after 3 years of, okay, there's one, there's two, you don't count. He's my coworker, so he doesn't count. He has to play for. Okay, so only one person, that's okay. I won't be talking too much about the game itself, but more about the journey that we went through as UX designers throughout the project. So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about my background. I started my career at EA, where my job was to create screens for sports games. And after a couple of years, I decided to move to an advertising company called DDB. I spent 4.5 years. Mad Men, does anybody recognize? Yes? Okay, good. I wasn't sure if people would get it. So I spent 4.5 years at DDB as a creative, where I got to work with many other disciplines to come up with online strategies for our clients. I love the creative problem-solving part of the job, but I really miss working in games. So I said bye-bye to Don Draper. And when I joined Kabam, I felt right at home. There is something really amazing about gaming industry, and I hope you guys all agree. I think it's the passion that people bring, and I think it's a bit of a craziness, weirdness, and a bit of strangeness that gaming industry just have. And I love every bit of it. So there I was, a lead UI UX artist, which was a bit confusing because UI or UX to me have always been about design, not art. UI and UX at the core are about creative problem solving, and aesthetics was a result of the good graphic design exercise. Still, the expectation of me was to make things pretty. And I hear some chuckles. I'm guessing that you guys have faced a similar situations. This was a huge difference where the creatives in the ad industry, which is equivalent to UI UX designers in gaming, were seen with completely different view. There, the creatives were responsible for coming up with a solution that will address the business problem and not only the visual execution. So today, I would like to talk about how we changed that perception and how we gave our UX discipline a seat at the table. And I believe there are many ways to get there, but here are the 5 design principles that have worked for us in Marvel Contest of Champions. Traditionally, game design and production team has led a lot of decision-making process. Decisions on the core toy, features, roadmap, the rules, and sometimes even the UI flow would be decided by these teams and get passed on to the next team, which is UX team. So it was natural for a lot of team members to continue the same process. So one day in Marvel, we were asked to create a full screen overlay for Message of the Day. For any of you guys who don't know what Message of the Day, it is an advertisement about new events and offers that happens in our game. And often it's a full screen overlay that just pops up in the beginning of the game. So there was pretty common practice at the time in a lot of mobile games, and I think still today as well. So right away, this was the expectation from us to create for our game as well. So let's go back to the original request. This was a pretty simple request, but when you think about it, it is the solution that's being asked here to be executed, and not a request to solve the problem, which would be that we need to find a way to efficiently communicate with others, with our users, about our new events and offers, and guarantee that all users see this message. Now, there are so many ways to solve this problem, and to me, it was up to the UX designers to come up with a bunch of solutions, go through the pros and cons, and give us the strongest recommendation. So we decided to do work from this problem set rather than the solution that was being asked, and walk through our design process to find the solution that we believe was the right solution for our users. So when we presented our final solution, we explained the benefits it gives us instead of focusing on what was planned before. This solution, to us, achieved the same goal, but with likely lower churn rate because it's not so intrusive as a full screen overlay. Also, it'll give much higher impression rate because it's guaranteeing that users will see this screen and see this MOTD every time they log in and reconnect and when they come back to the home screen. But because there was already a visual in everybody's mind, it was really hard to sell this new design. At the end, we were able to convince them to move forward with this design, but what I realized was we should have really aligned our expectation way before we went through the design process and pitched the final idea. What we should have done is we should have reframed the task together to ensure it's problem-based, and then focus on the end goal. So we wanted to make sure that we get this learning captured and carried forward, so we decided to change a couple of things in how we work. One, we asked other disciplines to write requests to UX team in the form of a problem and not a solution. And two, we asked to limit the description to the task to design intent and end goal only. So we sometimes had to send the tasks back and show the individuals how to write the task for UX team, which sounds really silly, but the process really helped us to be mindful of what they're requesting from our UX team. And it also helped educate our discipline on what our team actually does. So here's an example. In our game, there's an optimal path for all the users to take. But say that a big portion of the users aren't taking the optimal path, and therefore having a negative experience. If we were to focus on the solution, one may say, make this optimal path brighter, kind of similar to what David was talking about, make this button glow, right? The first task already assumes that it's the path that needs fixing, and it gets us to focus on the visual part of the path, which may or may not be the right solution. But if you look at the second task, it requests to help users to choose the most optimal path. Now, this invites you to understand the core problem first, and it backs it up with some other relevant information such as data. The solution could be that we make the optimal path default while providing some other options for different user types. Or it's that users need to help understanding what makes a path more optimal. Whatever the answer may be, a problem-based task allows for more room for creative problem solving, which is exactly what we're looking for. As more and more people understood why we're doing this, the perception of us started changing slowly. We're moving from a team that provides a visual treatment to an already decided solution to a team that designs a solution instead. The next thing I want to talk about is we wanted to tackle the problem of designing team, collaborating and challenging together. There wasn't enough of that in the beginning. Because there's huge overlap between UX and game design, it was important that we are able to collaborate together on all the decisions that we make every day. However, a lot of decisions were still made between game design and production team, and the client team would often go to the game design team to get the answers on functionalities, edge cases, or sometimes flow, which were really UX questions. This is mostly due to the fact that this was the normal process for a lot of us that's coming from different gaming studios. And also because the organic conversation that were happening within the teams that led to the final decision, and sometimes without having the right stakeholders being there. I hope you guys remember this. The situation we just talked about reminded me a lot of that Friends episode where Rachel started smoking just to be part of the conversation that was happening between her coworkers while they were having a cigarette outside. So we realized this was exactly the case for us, minus the smoking, but it was about sitting short. Because we sat so far away from game design and production team, we are missing out on all the organic conversation. And to be part of that conversation, we physically had to move the seats, and of course my dog. He's with me every day at work, and he wasn't so happy he had to move, so he was sulking for a couple of days. So once we moved the seats to have game and UX design sitting together, we started discussing our design problems and solutions far more frequently. Sitting between the client and game design team also helped, because if there are any UX questions, they would go to game design team, but they can direct them to us to solve those problems. We did sometimes have disagreements, of course, but it was good because without that tension and challenging each other on our solutions and process, we wouldn't be able to make a good product. So through these changes and learnings on how to work together, we started building a tighter relationship with those teams that really helped us to be the UX designer that we were supposed to be. So as we got into the production phase, we started including the stakeholders throughout the design process. When you're designing user experience for a game, there's so many stakeholders for us to consider. We have players, our number one client. We have game design, who sets the game design intent and the goal. We have programming team looking for efficient structure and performance on all the different devices that we have to deal with. We have live ops team who deals with events and offers and monetization. And then we have platform partners, IP licensor, QA, marketing, player experience, community, server engineers, and so on. But in the beginning, we failed to identify all the stakeholders and determine whom we should bring into our feedback loop. For example, Crystal screen is one of those screens where we forgot to loop in all the stakeholders. Our users come to purchase crystals with in-game currency, and since this was the main way for our users to obtain heroes, LiveOps had to create content for this screen every week, or every few weeks. So before we started designing, we spent a lot of time with LiveOps just talking about what they're going to need from our team and this screen, as well as how they're going to utilize this screen. The team had a very robust tool in the back end to run events and offers. They're very, very complicated. So we had to create a screen that was very modular, flexible, and scalable. But because we included them throughout the design process, we were able to hear their feedback early on and implement them before it went to the programming team. But what we forgot to do was to consider other stakeholders, such as QA and engineering team. They were aware of the main functionalities, but all the different little offer structures and other complicated elements that we've designed weren't communicated clearly. So they weren't built to scale or tested with the actual data before it went out. So a good chunk of the system actually could not be used when it went out, and it was quite costly. After that incident, we decided to change our work process. This shows a very small segment of entire dev process because we wanted to focus on the part that touches UX the most. We wanted to make sure any discipline that worked with us knew exactly when they were going to be included and also what to expect from us. The new process included a couple of new key points. We had a stakeholder meeting where all stakeholders would come to review our design and have that chance to provide feedback. And all of us would gather a game before it went to the QA team for testing. So we got all the stakeholders to review the chart and provide feedback. So when it rolled out, everybody was happy and it was pretty successful. When the team started seeing how passionate we are, not only about making the user experience better for the product, but for us in the studio, we gained respect and trust for what we do and for UX itself as well. So coming from an advertising background, talking strategy to achieve business goal was never a taboo, but there is a bit of a sensitivity around talking about monetization or business strategy in game dev. We do our best to create games that our players will enjoy, and to me, we should also do our best to create healthy revenue to be a successful business. We often mistake a good UX design to be the most satisfying and frictionless experience for users. But in my mind, a good UX design shouldn't just be about creating user-centered design, but also to keep the business goal in mind. When we designed this crystal screen we just talked about, business goal was as equally important as usability. In our game, the users have some free and some easily achievable crystals, and we could prioritize this on top, so when they come into the screen, they can claim those as soon as possible and get out of the screen as soon as possible. But our goal was to encourage users to stay here a little bit longer and have that shopping experience. the free crystals that all user types can get every day are placed sort of in the mid-pack so that they can find them fairly easily, but they'll be exposed to all the feature crystal on top, and it changes quite often. And the crystals that can be easily achieved by the competitive players are placed on the very bottom. As they scroll down, they'll have to look through all the other crystals so that we, one, encourage users to open the crystals they have, and two, create awareness of other crystals that they may want to purchase in the future. So by showing that we understand the business goal and incorporating it into our everyday design, we added incredible amount of value to UX discipline. And that enabled us to be considered as a strategic partner for the product. In the beginning of Marvel, we didn't have much data on our users, but shortly after, we had over 1 million users playing our game every day. So we started gathering more information about how our game is played, and we started analyzing and optimizing our game more. And that made it really easy for us to measure the impact of the changes that we make. PvP Arena in Marvel is a perfect example for this. The arena is where people can play against different people's characters, and they get multipliers as they play, and you get more points and so on. So if you look at the flow, you can see how many screens users have to go through just to get 3 fights in. When we first designed this, we honestly weren't expecting our users to play this mode for hours at a time. But when we look at the data, we realize that some players put in about 100 fights per arena, which means that they are on average going through about 2,400 screens per arena, and this is just a small segment of our game. So a good chunk of their time is actually spent on going through and clicking through those screens instead of the fighting itself. So we looked into how we can make this flow and overall experience better. We found a total of 5 screens that we can remove with redesign. And I know it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but when you multiply by 100 fights, it's fairly big improvements. And when you look at that, by time instead of number of screens, it's even bigger improvement. You can see that it's almost half the time it used to be. On x-axis, we have the time spent. On y-axis, you have percentage of users. Another great example for optimizing experience and measuring its impact would be the boost use button that we introduced in our flow. So users had a lot of boosts in their inventory, but they weren't using these items. They had multiple places where they can actually use these items from, but because the triggers weren't placed at the right place at the right time, they were simply forgetting to use them. So we did a couple things. We, one, made it easy for our users, and two, reminded them when it's contextually important. We found 2 places in the flow where users will likely consider using boosts, moments like when they're about to go into a quest, moments like when they're about to go into a fight. We added those trigger points on both screens and created a pop-up that brings all the boost items they already have and the ones they could possibly purchase. So by making this little change, we increased the purchase and use of the boost dramatically. On x-axis, you have dates. Y-axis is the number of boosts purchased and used. So you can see the huge jump between the pink bars and the green bars, and that's when the change was released. Overall, we increased the total number by approximately 40%, which is not too shabby. So hope you guys remember this message of the day from the earlier slides. It's the one where we designed instead of the full screen overlay. So just for fun, we added some telemetries on this screen here to measure the impression rate that we told them that it was going to be great. And it's getting a whopping 11 million impressions per day. And we assumed the older design would have gotten maybe around 2 to 3 million impressions per day. So it's really good to measure these KPIs. I believe this is a very important step for us. We need to get in the habit of measuring the impact of our changes to not only learn more about our users, but also to validate the importance of UX. When we started communicating the impact of these UX improvements, we were able to back up our request to invest more into our UX team. So I've gone through 5 design principles that helped us champion UX in Marvel Contest Champions. The last thing I want to share is about people. So Marvel was a pretty tough project because we had to go through all these changes and we had to do all the learnings together while making the game. And the last 5 years of championing UX was fun, but often quite tough. Having people that supported me and believe in UX really helped me to get through these tough times. And so my last recommendation is to find people who can champion you and what you believe. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the screenshot in the message of the day. Dave Cross, I'm working in mobile as well. And you had a pop-up that you didn't do, and you guessed to have that many. Is this a landing screen, and this is the home screen where the player just does their entire flow?
Yeah, so the little module that you saw on the side is the MOTD. Originally, it was asked to be a full screen pop-up or overlay of some sort, and that would be the module that we put in instead of having it pop up in people's face.
Right, that's awesome. How did you measure the impressions that you got off of that? I assume it's literally 100%, but how do you actually get the engagement out of it?
Right, so the impression is sort of a tricky thing to measure, right? It's not a click-through rate, right? So we measured on how many times people come to home screen, because that's when we get the impression. So the original design, or what people were expecting, was full screen overlay, and you become a little tiny button like many other games. But people have to trigger that, right, to see the full message. But this way, every time they come back to the home screen, they'll be able to see that. So that's how we measured it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is a bit of a selfish question, but that's okay. You and I have taken similar career paths going from advertising into gaming. What's the biggest UX challenge that you found taking the learnings from advertising and trying to bring it over into the gaming industry?
Well, let me think. What is the biggest challenge? I think, honestly, it would be this process. What people expect from me versus what I believe I can do and what I believe my team can do was quite different. So we weren't given that opportunity, and having to push that sort of boundaries of these are the things that we should be responsible for, even the wireframe or being part of the design discussions, even as something as simple as having to be in a meeting where all the decisions were being made. So challenging that sort of boundaries was really hard. But when you get right people to champion you and champion UX together, it made it a lot easier. But yeah, that was the biggest challenge for me. Thank you very much.